welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll be sharing 5 summer farmhouse DIYs. I'm also participating with my friend Heidi Sonboul from Happily Thriving Heidi for her Friend Friday Hop. All of the friends included in today's hop will also be sharing summer DIYs, and each friend will have a link in their description box to the next friend's video so that you can hop on over to all of our videos for some really good summer decor inspiration. If you guys are new here to my channel, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below, and I really hope that you all enjoy today's video. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's projects. For the first DIY, I'll be making a summer sign. For this project, I used a 6¼ inch by 30 inch unfinished wood piece from Hobby Lobby, wood letters that spell out summer from Michaels. I also picked up this sunflower stencil from Folk Art, Craft Smart wood stain in the color brown, Waverly chalk paint in plaster, maize, hazelnut, and also in the color moss, paintbrushes, and my hot glue gun. For this one, I started by using my wood stain on all of the outer portion of this wood piece. The wood stain that I'm using is a water-based stain, so it's really great for using indoors. You don't have to worry about all of the toxic fumes or anything, and I don't even wear gloves when I use this because it just washes right off. I also did the inner edge of this little lip, and I wasn't really worried about it getting on the flat surface of this because I'll be painting over it. After my stain has dried, I'm then painting the inside of this wood piece with my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. When painting around all of the edges that I've already stained, I'm just really carefully and slowly painting around them so that I have nice crisp edges. After my paint has dried, I've already set out my letters that spell summer right in the center of this wood piece. I'm then gluing them down with some hot glue. I'm picking up the letter from where I've set it down so that it is right in the place where I want it to be, putting hot glue on the back side of the letter and then pressing it down onto the wood surface and just holding it there until the glue has dried, and I'm continuing this step for each letter. Now that my letters are all glued down, I'm now applying the sunflower stencil that I got in a pack of stencils from Michaels, and they are from the brand Folk Art. I'm then placing the stencil right where the stem of the sunflower hits at 4 inches from the edge of my wood piece. For the stem of my flower, I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color moss, and I'm applying it using my Dollar Tree stencil brush. Then for the flower portion of my sunflower, I'm using the color maize from Waverly, and I'm just using a chip brush to apply that. And then for the inside of my flower, I'm using a small paintbrush and the hazelnut color from Waverly. Once the paint has completely dried, I'm then peeling off the stencil, and I'm using the same stencil for the other side of my sign. I'm placing the sunflower where the stem hits at 4 inches out from the outer edge of my sign. And I painted my flower the exact same way that I did my first flower. And after that paint has dried, I then just peel off the stencil, and that was the last step. Here is my summer sign all finished. I love how it turned out. It was so simple to make, and it really looks a lot more expensive than it was to make it. Now moving into DIY number 2, I'll be making a beehive tag sign. For this project, I used this tag-shaped ornament that I had left over from Christmas time, and I picked it up from Dollar General. I'll be using this beehive stencil from Michaels and also this Farm Fresh stencil from Michaels, Waverly chalk paint in plaster, ink, hazelnut, and also in the color maize, paintbrushes, and jute. I first started by taking out the jute hanger that was on this sign, and then I wanted to paint over this Let It Snow image that was on the front of it, and I did that using my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I did have to do 2 coats of paint to get that all covered up. I'm actually going to be using the back side of this sign for the front of my sign. So here I'm using that same color plastered chalk paint, and I did have to do 2 coats of paint on this side as well. Once the paint has all dried, I'm then taking this Farm Fresh stencil and I'm placing it towards the top in the center of my sign. Once I have it exactly where I want it, I'm just pressing it down to make sure it's attached nicely before I start painting. And to paint this, I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I'm using my Dollar Tree stencil brush to press the paint over top of all of the letters. I am using 2 pieces of paper around the edges so that I don't get any of that paint on my plastered color paint that I've already put on. And then for the beehive that I'm going to be putting on this sign as well, I'm trimming down the stencil because I'm not going to be using the bee that was on the stencil. I'm pressing that down right underneath the words Farm Fresh, and then the color that I used for my beehive was from Waverly, and it's in the color Maize, and I applied it using my Dollar Tree stencil brush. Once the paint on the hive is all dry, I'm then just peeling off the stencil, and I did want to add a little bit of extra color to this, so I'm taking my just regular small paintbrush and the Waverly chalk paint in the color Hazelnut, and I'm dry brushing that around all of the edges and then very lightly over the front of my sign. Then for the very last step, I'm restringing a piece of jute through the already pre-drilled hole in the sign and then just tying off a knot. Here is my beehive sign all finished. This again was super simple to make, and it would be the perfect decor piece to add to a tiered tray or a shelf. Now moving into DIY number 3, I'll be making a decorative bee pot. For this one, I used a 5-inch terracotta pot that I got from Dollar Tree, a bee stencil from Michaels, Waverly chalk paint in plaster, ink, hazelnut, and also in moss, folk art chalk paint in Castle, paintbrushes, greenery stems from Hobby Lobby, and also buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby, floral foam, jute, scissors, and my hot glue gun. I first started by painting my entire pot with my Waverly paint in the color Plaster. I did do one pretty thick coat, and I also painted about 2 inches down on the inside of my pot as well. After the paint has dried, I then took my hazelnut colored paint on a piece of paper towel and I started dabbing that over top of my entire pot. Once it was all dabbed on, I then took what was left over on the paper towel and wiped it around the edges of the top lip of my pot. I used this method and I think it was my last video, and I really liked how it made the pot look aged and distressed, so I'm doing this method once again. I'm just building up multiple colors. After I had the hazelnut color on, I then took the moss color and I'm doing the same thing. I'm dabbing it on the entire pot on a piece of paper towel. And then I wanted to add kind of more of like a rusticy gray color, so I took my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle, and this time instead of dabbing it on with paper towel, I'm wiping it going horizontally across my entire pot. And then for the last paint color, I'm taking Plaster once again and I'm dabbing it over top of the other 3 colors that I just painted on to give it more of a textured look. Next, I'm putting on this bee stencil right on the front of my pot, and the sticky side of the stencil really wasn't staying down, so I did have to use 2 pieces of painter's tape on each side of the bee to hold it down because I didn't want it moving around when I was painting. The paint I'm using to go over the bee is the Waverly paint, once again in the color Ink, and I'm using my Dollar Tree stencil brush, which you guys know is one of my favorites to use for stenciling. Once the paint has dried, I'm peeling off the painter's tape and pulling off the stencil. Originally, I was going to use a really pretty yellow colored ribbon from Dollar Tree, and right now I'm measuring it around the very top lip of my pot and cutting it down to size. I'm then using some of this buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby and I'm just measuring it along the yellow piece that I just cut. But then I decided I wasn't going to use the yellow ribbon, I'm just going to use the buffalo check and the burlap ribbon. So I'm cutting the burlap ribbon down to size, but since it's so thick, I had to trim it up a little bit and I just cut the 2 ends of the ribbon off to make it a little bit smaller. To attach my ribbon, I'm using hot glue. I place the glue right on the pot and then I'm putting the burlap ribbon down first. So I'm wrapping it around the top lip and then just gluing down the other end. Once that one's glued on, I'm then putting the piece of buffalo check ribbon right over top of the burlap ribbon. And the way that I cut the burlap ribbon, I did do it really messy because I wanted this ribbon to look rustic and not real like put together. Once the ribbon was on, I then took some of this floral foam from Dollar Tree, cut it down so that I could place it right in the center of my terracotta pot. And then I'm going to be using some of these greenery stems from Hobby Lobby. I'm cutting the stem to make it shorter, and then I'm also cutting the eucalyptus off of the stem so that I can place them out farther than just the stem bundle. And then just placing them into the floral foam. And to top it off, I'm using some of this reindeer moss from Dollar Tree around all of the stems. Here is my decorative bee pot all finished. This one took no time at all to make, and it would be perfect to add with other decor pieces. Now for DIY number 4, I'm making a bead sunflower wreath. For this one, I'm using a 10-inch steel ring from Michaels, 24mm and 15mm wood beads from Michaels, lamb's ear stems from Walmart and sunflower stems from Dollar Tree, scissors, jute, and my hot glue gun. For this project, you need to have your metal ring cut so that you can string your beads on. I did have my husband already do this for me off camera. I'm first stringing on my 24mm bead, and between my 24mm bead and the 15mm bead, I'm gonna have some jute tied. I'm tying the piece of jute on, and then I wrapped the jute 3 times around the ring and then tied another knot. I wanted to have a good amount of jute between each bead. So after I had the first bead on, then I put the 15mm bead on, did the jute again, and I continued alternating those same steps for my entire ring. When placing everything on your ring, you want to make sure that your bead is sitting close to the jute because you don't want to be able to see any of that metal ring through the jute. You'll see me putting hot glue on the 2 ends of the metal ring and then tying a piece of jute around that. That was supposed to hold everything together, but it didn't work. And what I ended up doing, but not getting on camera, was I put hot glue in the 2 holes of one bead, and then I placed the 2 ends of the metal ring into the holes of the bead, and that held everything together really nicely. Next, I'm using some scissors to cut down all of the ends of the jute that I have sticking out everywhere, and I'm cutting them down as close to the bead as I possibly can so that you can't see any of the ends of the jute sticking out on my wreath. Now I'm cutting down this lamb's ear stem that I picked up from Walmart, and I'm going to be using 2 different lamb's ear stems for this wreath, and I'm just tying them around my wreath using a piece of jute. I wasn't going to try to glue any of the flowers on. I thought it would just be a lot easier to use some jute, or you could use a floral wire even if you wanted to attach your flowers that way, but the jute worked fine for me since I have jute going along my wreath anyway. I didn't think you'd really be able to see it. So I used 2 of the lamb's ear stems. Like I said, I did one going in one direction on the bottom and one going in another, but I ended up cutting the top portion of the lamb's ear stems off because it was a little bit too overwhelming, and then I just placed what I cut off again right in the center portion of the bottom part of my wreath. I'm also going to be adding some of these sunflowers from Dollar Tree. I'm using 3 of them, and when I'm cutting them off of their stems, I'm leaving enough of the stem on that I can stick it in the jute that's between each bead, and then I'm going to be wrapping that stem around that steel ring of my wreath. I'm using some of this buffalo check ribbon for my hanger on my wreath. I just measured it for however long I want my hanger to be and then just tied it off. I actually ended up taking this off because where I hung it to show you guys in the video, it was a little bit too long, but I'll be placing it back on when I hang it on my door. I also wanted to add some buffalo check going throughout my wreath, so I'm just cutting a few different size pieces of this buffalo check ribbon, and then I'm hot gluing the 2 ends together. I did a couple large pieces and a couple small pieces. Once I had them all cut and made, I then started hot gluing them in between all of the greenery and the sunflowers, just kind of wherever I thought that it needed some ribbon. I placed the hot glue right on the bead or the jute, depending on wherever I was going to be attaching it, and then I placed the ribbon right on top of the hot glue to attach them. This is my bead sunflower wreath all finished. I had so much fun making this wreath, and it's going to go perfect with all of my decor this summer. For DIY number 5, it's a 2-parter. I'll be making a tea towel ladder and towels. And for this project, I used 2 16-inch by 1.5 inch by 3/4 inch pieces of wood, and I also used 3 8-inch by 1.5 inch by 3/4 inch pieces of wood. Waverly chalk paint in plaster and also in the color ink, paintbrushes, Craft Smart wood stain in brown, nails, a hammer, my hot glue gun, flour sack towels from Walmart, this Hello Sunshine stencil from Dollar Tree, a bee stencil, and also this Sweet as Honey stencil from Michael's. I started by painting all 5 pieces of my wood with my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. I only had to do 1 coat of this paint on all of my pieces of wood. Once the paint was completely dry, I then went in with my Craft Smart wood stain in the color brown and just an old towel, and I started going over all of that paint color, and this is going to give all of my pieces of wood almost like a barn wood look, and I just rubbed it on doing a 1 coat of this, and I did that for all 5 pieces of wood. Like I mentioned before, this is a water-based stain, so it's okay for me to not wear gloves. If you're wondering why I'm not, it just washed right off with some soap and water. Next, I'm placing all of my wood pieces together to form my ladder and looking at how far apart I want each step to be. I just kind of eyeballed it. It wasn't exact. This is supposed to be rustic, so it's okay if it's not exact. I then put hot glue on the ends of the boards that I'm using for my steps and then pressed them against the 2 outer boards. And I continued that for all 3 of my step boards. Only this did not work. I usually use hot glue on projects like this just to hold the pieces of wood together before I can nail them in. And I think it was the stain that I used. The hot glue didn't want to stick to it, and unfortunately I didn't have any wood glue on hand or clamps. So if you are going to do this project, definitely use wood glue and clamps to hold everything together. I went to plan B, and for this I used my outside porch pillar to be able to nail against because I needed a hard surface. I placed the step board against the pillar while I nailed each nail in just to hold everything together because I couldn't really stand it upright and try to nail the nails in. It was way too complicated. So this was a step B, and it ended up working out okay, but like I said before, definitely use some wood glue and clamps to hold everything together before you start nailing everything in. And I used 2 nails on each side when nailing in my steps. I wanted to make sure that they held together really well since I didn't have that glue helping me out at all. And I also probably should have put down a towel or something against the concrete so that it didn't scratch up my wood, but I actually ended up really liking the way that the wood looked once it was all scratched up because it did look extra rustic. And that was kind of the look that I was going for anyway, so mistakes can be a good thing sometimes. Now that I've got my ladder all made, I'm now moving on to the tea towel portion of this video. And I started out by ironing 2 of the towels that came in the pack that I picked up from Walmart. I ironed them on a really hot setting so that I could get all of the wrinkles out. But as you'll see here in a minute, I did have some wrinkles still in my towels. I then placed a piece of paper down under where I'm going to be painting, and then I stuck this Hello Sunshine stencil in the center of my towel but towards the bottom. And then I'm going to be using my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink to stencil all over the letters. And I did use 2 pieces of paper around the stencil so that I could keep my towel nice and clean. Once it was all painted and dried, I then peeled off the stencil. For this next towel, I'm doing the same thing by placing a piece of paper under where I'm going to be painting, and I'm placing my stencil in the center towards the bottom once again on my towel. I'm using this bee stencil on the bottom and then the Sweet as Honey stencil right above the bee. These stencils you can get at Michael's and I believe on Amazon as well, and they do come in a pack of stencils. For all of the color that I'm using on my letters and my bee, it is the Waverly paint in the color ink. Once again, this is my go-to stenciling color in this video, and I did use my Dollar Tree stencil brush. Once all of the paint has completely dried for all of the letters and my bee, I just peeled the stencils right off. Here is my ladder and towels all finished. I'm so happy with how they turned out. Even though I had a little setback with my ladder, I'm glad I was able to make it work. Be sure that you guys check out the link in my description box to hop on over to the next friend's video for today's friend hop. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing, and be sure to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And as always, I would love to hear in the comments down below if you guys are new to my channel and which DIY from today's video was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching.